Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy Luke here for our weekly DFS live stream for this week's Genesis Invitational. We're going to be going over everything you guys need to know for this week's event, whether it's the weather, of course, player pool ownership, any questions that you guys have down in the chat. Look forward to hearing from you guys. Look forward to hearing your questions. And let's go ahead and make some lineups for this week. You can see we already have a few guys down in the chat. What's going on, Justin? And what's going on, dropping birdies? Ooh, a countdown. Yeah, we're getting fancy here now. So I told you guys I was going to try and get more professional with the streams, and every little baby step that we make, I guess, makes it a little bit better. Let's go ahead and start off with a little bit of a course breakdown. So I'm going to start off in a little bit of a different order, just because I think it's important to know how this course is playing before we even hop into the weather. First and foremost, this is the Riviera Country Club. It's one of the more iconic venues on the PGA Tour. You can see on the Data Golf page right here, the average score here is over par, and in some years it's been well above that. Now, there's also been outliers in the opposite direction, usually when it tends to get extremely wet at this golf course. But from the conditions that we've seen throughout the week, the weather that we have projected throughout the weekend should see something very similar to what we saw last year. In terms of the driving accuracy, you can see it's well below the tour average. They're just 47.2%. And over with the greens in regulation, also well below tour average. That's usually the reason why this score is so high here. There are certainly some scoreable holes, such as number 1, 10, also the 2 other par 5s. But all the other 13 holes are pretty devilish, pretty hard to get by. So that's what we've got with the golf course. Again, if you want a full breakdown of this venue, I have a course breakdown up on the channel. Let's hop over to the weather and talk about some of the effects that we may see. So this is for tomorrow morning, for Thursday, and they're going to be teeing off right around 6, 7 a.m. Even though it is an invitational field, they only have limited daylight, so they will be going off as soon as humanly possible. And you can see that there is some wind in the morning. That's not what we're used to seeing on the West Coast. Typically, it's in the 5 to 6 mile an hour range in the morning, and will get a little bit stronger in the afternoon towards 7 to 8 miles an hour. Now, that's the opposite for day one. If we take a look at Friday, you can see it's returning to your typical conditions, right? In the morning, 5 to 6 mile an hour, like I said before, and in the afternoon, a little bit stronger towards 7 to 8. That means that we may see a slight preference towards the guys playing the PM AM stack. So the guys that are teeing off towards the afternoon on Thursday, and then of course getting the easier conditions in the morning on Friday. With that being said, I don't expect it to be a huge advantage, mostly due to some of the rain we've had this week, and that happened on Tuesday. And really, I should say hail, because they had 0.56 centimeters worth of rain, which is essentially nothing, right? That's 56 millimeters worth of rain, but they did have a ton of hail. So they do have at least a little bit of moisture on that golf course, as some of that hail on from Tuesday started to melt off, that type of thing. You are going to get a little bit of a softer golf course. So even though those guys on Thursday morning will be playing in a little bit of stronger wind, as we've already talked about, they're also going to have really soft conditions. The dew is still going to be out there from the morning, and I expect them to take advantage. So even though they do have stronger winds, I'm not necessarily playing that PM AM stack, as I mentioned. I've seen plenty of people around the industry talking about it, but what they forget about is that this afternoon wave, all of that dew is going to have evaporated. So that advantage that morning wave is likely to be able to take advantage of will not be the same in the afternoon. And by the time we get to Friday, it's been had a whole 2.5 days to dry off. You might not see a ton of dew in the morning, so you might not have that same type of effect. In general, with all that being said, we're not really favoring one wave versus another. So I've seen some people over the industry that are doing that, but that's not something that I'm going with for this week. Let's go ahead and go over to the player pool. We'll touch on some of the comments down in chat before we do so. What is going on, Joe? Hopefully doing well this weekend. And what is going on, Continental? He says moisture is the great equalizer. Absolutely, especially at a course like this. Have you guys seen some of the PGA Tour tweets that he put out this week? I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. Running at right around 14s or even 14.5 on the stint meter. You guys know that hole number 10. They actually posted a funny montage today of people trying to hit that green and failing miserably. I'm really looking forward to this week, particularly if that moisture tends to die off, because I want it to be firm and fast. I want it to be absolutely devilish. Gene says, do you have any videos that focus on golf betting? Winners, top 10, 20. Sometimes I put up a video for that. Sometimes I don't. It usually depends on my betting card. So if I'm putting out a full betting card for the week, I've actually invested in that market, I'll typically go and put out a video covering. Now, it's not comprehensive. It's not an hour long. or anything like that. It's more just covering the bets that I've done. But for this week, I guess I'll go ahead and cover it right now. I only have 2 outright bets. One's on Jon Rahm, and that's a 3.5 unit bet. I've put a massive bet on Jon Rahm this week. I think he wins this by 5 strokes. Not kidding. And then the next bet I put is DJ. I think he also has a really solid shot to win this week. And I put 2.5 units on that. So that's all 6 of the units that I typically use in my betting right there. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I see down here said you're a sadist, bro. When it comes to golf, absolutely. I think that these guys are pampered. I think that they're used to playing really well. And when you see them struggle and get really frustrated, that's what me and you do on a golf course, right? When we're out there, we're struggling, we're usually getting the bad end of the stick. They deserve that. They deserve to have that happen to them, because the fact of the matter is they should be playing extremely difficult golf courses. They're professionals. They don't need to be getting to 25, 30 under par. That's unnatural. That's not the game of golf. What we saw at Kapalua, that pissed me off beyond belief. I do not like seeing golf tournaments like that. That's not how the game's meant to be played. Again, look back at the golden ages of golf in the 20s and 30s. The average score was over par that won a lot of those golf tournaments. So that's the day and age that I like for golf. Let's go ahead and go into the player pool, though. And I was in the shower a little bit earlier, and I was thinking about the top end range here, how I was going to go ahead and explain this. And I think of it as a really nice restaurant. So follow me with this analogy here, right? You're at a really nice steakhouse. Say it's one of those Michelin star restaurants, right, that you don't have the privilege of going to very often. And typically at those restaurants, you have a hard time choosing what to eat, especially if you're indecisive like myself. There might be portions of steak that you really like. There might be the prime rib, some really solid seafood options on the menu as well. And that's the way that I see this board up here. Everyone you can make a case for playing. Every single player has a skill set that really separates them from the rest. The issue is sometimes it's hard to choose between them, but the way I see it is that this is a steakhouse, right? And if anytime you go to a really good steakhouse, you don't want to be ordering seafood. You want to be making sure that you get one of those prime cuts of meat, and that's going to be the case for this week. Guys like, let's say, Colin Morikawa, they're the seafood on the steak menu. They're not somebody that's good with that short game. Getting up and down is far from his specialty. Same thing with the Xander Schauffele. Same thing with Victor Hovland. Hell, if you went to a seafood restaurant, you'd be wanting to order those plates. But now that we're at a steakhouse, that type of thing, you don't want to be ordering the wrong type of meal. If you guys have done that before in real life, you've probably been disappointed, right? It's like if you go to an Italian restaurant and you try to order a piece of steak, it's probably not going to be as good as if you ordered the pasta. So that's the way that we're taking this week. Even though there are all these high-end options, all these plates, and I'm sure you guys would be more than willing to roster or, of course, eat in this analogy, make sure you order the right meal. For example, guys like a Justin Thomas, he's the steakhouse. He's the steak at the steakhouse, right? He's got the ball striking that we're looking for, the around the green game to get it done here. The one exception of all the guys up top is Jon Rahm. He's the surf and turf. Now, that's why really this analogy comes in. He can do the short game stuff, of course, but he's also a bomber. He's also that ball striker. So if you have to choose on the board, why not take both? Why not take the steak and the seafood combination, that filet and lobster tail special at the steakhouse? And that's exactly what Jon Rahm is. He can do everything. He has no hole in his game. You can see from the modeling, #1 in total, #1 in course fit, #3 in recent form rank. There is not a hole in his game. In fact, he's great on shots gained putting on Poa Inua. So that's the way I'm handling this, right? If you're at the steakhouse and you can't choose between taking that steak, the bomber, or of course that short game guy, the seafood, go ahead and do both. So hopefully you guys enjoyed a little bit of that analogy there. I know it's a little bit corny and whatnot, but that's what we're going with there. Patrick Cantlay is more of the short game specialist, right? Somebody who around the green isn't necessarily his strong suit, especially if you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds. You can see he's hardly gaining in that category. The biggest issue is the putting on Poa Inua. We've already talked about this during the fades video. He's worse than Justin Thomas on the surface, and that's saying something. I mean, Justin Thomas, one of the worst putters of any of these elite tier players, and if he's gaining more strokes on Poa Inua than anyone else in this range, that's drastic, right? That's something to note, particularly when Justin Thomas, his ball striking numbers over these last 3 weeks has been a lot better than Patrick Cantlay. Cantlay's been completely carried by his putter. So I do like seeing that with Justin Thomas, especially the historical numbers being better than a Patrick Cantlay. Moving a little bit further down the board, Colin Morikawa. We haven't seen him for quite some time. As I said before, he deals with those around the green issues. So perhaps you're ordering the wrong plate if you're going to a Colin Morikawa. DJ, we've talked a ton about here on the channel as a sleeper pick. He has elite course history. He looked great the last time out. I mean, the ball striking was absolutely immaculate. The issue was the short game. And for the whole 2021 season, there was no better player with the short game than DJ. At least of these stud tier guys up top. I mean, his shots game putting was absolutely through the roof. He's always been a really solid around the green player, which makes him one of my favorite options, right? He's a little bit better of a course fit than a Colin Morikawa, also than a Patrick Cantlay. You're getting a lower price, and of course, one of the lowest ownership numbers up top. So I definitely think DJ might get a little bit more ownership just because everybody's talking about him this week. I feel like everyone's in agreement that he's a really solid leverage play. But at the same time, most players that play DFS don't go on YouTube. They don't go on Twitter. They're not actively researching for their lineups. They're usually entering one or two lineups as a casual, and he may be somebody that's a little bit overlooked in those circles. Let's go on to some of the questions, comments down in chat. Gene says, FYI, DraftKings tournament. I'm not sure what you're talking about there. Joe says, Rom, me too, man. You can pair him up with a decent 6K guy, no problem this week. Yeah, especially the top of that 6K range. We'll get to it. It's guys that are sometimes in the 8K range for us in these tournaments. So for sure, agree with you. Driving Bridge says, I know Rom is a stud and all, but the things of the steakhouse, like this potato, shots getting around the green, ranked 150th. Does that matter? So yes, absolutely. So over the last 24 measured rounds, he's been crap around the green. So you can see very similar story to a Patrick Cantlay. But if we do a little bit of zooming out, right, give him a little bit more of a sample size, you can see he at least still gains in that category. So the fact that he's so good with the approach play and, of course, the off the tee play really does make the difference there. And something that I really need to start doing here, I'm going to start implementing this in my own shots gain metrics, is adjusting the around the green score. Because a lot of times this around the green score is extremely misleading, I think is the best way to put it. And guys that don't hit that many around the green shots that are so solid with their approach play, like a John Rahm is, that gains over a stroke per round in that category, have much less opportunities to hit around the green shots. So as a result, they don't gain nearly as much. Whereas somebody down here like a Cameron Smith, who, sure, he's been good on approach over these last 50 measured rounds. Before his career, the reason why he's such a solid around the green player is because he misses a ton more greens. So something I'm going to do is try to make a way to adjust for that, kind of do a weighted shots gained around the green score. Not something that I have right now, but I imagine if I did, John Rahm would have one of the better numbers in the field just because he doesn't miss many greens to begin with. And we've seen him at the Memorial, some of these really difficult golf courses in the past, have success in getting up and down. I mean, just think about that one chip in at the Memorial where he got penalized. The guy can get it done. So, and there you go. FYI, the tournament winning margin, 4 strokes or more, plus 350 on DraftKings. I may go ahead and do that because if DJ were to win, I think he wins in a pretty drastic fashion. I think John Rahm, if he wins in a pretty drastic fashion. And I also think if Justin Thomas wins this golf tournament, he wins by 3 or 4 strokes. Every single one of them, if they turn that putter around this week, I don't think it's going to be particularly close. Joe Hoffman says, Rahm and Hideki, probably my favorite 2 spend-ups. Yeah, we're going to get to Hideki. I absolutely love him this week. And then Joe says, any truth to lefties being decent at this golf course? I think most notably, you'd be talking about Bubba Watson with that, right? So that's really where that lefty narrative's coming from. The reason why he's good at this golf course is he's able to move the ball left to right and right to left with relative ease. He has no problem doing so. And there are a ton of doglegs in either direction. So typically the reason why he gets that advantage is the players that aren't comfortable moving it in one way versus another struggle on those holes, whereas Bubba Watson has no preference. So I think that's probably where that narrative is coming from. Correct me if I'm wrong. JB Holmes is a left. Is he a left? I can't remember. I feel like he is. That might be the only other lefty. That's one. Barry says, give me some DJ. Let's fucking go. Absolutely agree, man. So we got ourselves a little old-fashioned for tonight, guys. So going to have some fun with this. What we're going to do now is we're going to kind of skip around a little bit. I'm going to touch on my core plays. Actually, we'll do them in order, but I'll make sure I touch on all my core plays. This 9K range is probably the most vital spot this week. I mean, guys up top, you're either going to play Cantlay or Rahm. I don't think that's a surprise. I don't think many people are going to be playing both of them. Where you're going to make your money this week is in this 9K range and this 8K range because there's solid options throughout it. There are a ton of chalky options. And again, up top, everyone's going to try and fit in these studs. So you're not really going to differentiate yourself there. But okay, let's go ahead and touch on them. So first off, Rory McIlroy. I thought I was going to be a little bit unique in playing Rory, right? We haven't seen him for quite some time. He's $9,700. He's a good course fit. Again, he's looked pretty good overseas as well. Unfortunately, he's the chalk of the chalk, right? He went from right around 10% ownership to there at 14.5. That is far from ideal. The putting on POA is a little bit far from ideal as well. So I don't like to see those things, but I can't avoid it, right? There's a reason why he was a core pick for me this week. The the comps to Augusta National, also to what is it? Quail Hollow, also extremely good. I mean, he won Quail Hollow this year, right? I think that's something notable. I don't think you have to avoid him. I wish he was lower owned. I expected him to be at the beginning of the week. That's why I was so high on him to begin with, but it's not enough to make him a fade for me. Victor Hovland, on the other hand, not only did he really kind of screw us last week, he was in all my single entry stuff. I really thought he would have a good tournament there at the Waste Management. This is not a good course fit for him. Again, the main concern last week was the around the green play. If he were to miss greens, and the conditions were extremely firm and fast last week, that's why people were missing a lot of greens, he was going to be in trouble. Again, the green and regulation percentage at this golf tournament is around 59%, which means even if he has an excellent week, is a good standard deviation better than the field, he's only hitting 70% of greens at the very most. 30% of the time, if he has to get up and down, that is going to be a problem for Hovland. I mean, the guy is going to have issues getting up and down. Montereza says, do you do prize picks? Absolutely. At the end, we'll actually touch on a few of the prize picks targets. I do have a video already up on my channel for that, but we'll cover some of the things at the end. Joe says, yes, Bubba Watson and Bobby McIntyre was checking the Masters comps. Yeah, McIntyre played pretty good at the Masters. He's only played there twice, I believe. But yeah, that's why you see that type of thing, right? It's Bubba Watson. The reason why he's good at the Masters and at this golf course, it's not because he's a lefty. It's because he can move it in both directions. So McIntyre, I'm not sure I would really lump into that conversation. I'm not familiar enough with McIntyre. We haven't seen him enough on tour, right? I have no idea if he has a preference of moving it left to right or right to left. I do know that his shots gained metrics for the European Tour, again, we don't have shots gained, but you can do a little bit of a projection with it, would be top 5 on that tour. So I do like him here. Content also says Rory is cheap. Absolutely agree. And Joe Hoffman says, well said about Rory. I think ownership is just flat and leaning to the best plays. Yeah, right. It's not enough to make me fade him. He's a solid play. The only guy that really I'm fading because of ownership is Patrick Cantlay, because you can't play Cantlay and John Rahm in the same player pool and get exposure to these guys down here. Morikawa, it's a course fit thing. Same thing with a Victor Hovland. And even down here with a Scotty Scheffler, who we'll talk about here in a second. The reason why we're not playing them, it's not really ownership. It's more just course fit. Xander Schauffele, the same thing as well. And I guess I probably shouldn't have skipped Xander. He's an important talking point on this slate. He's somebody who early in the week I was playing, but at the same time, the around the green play has not been good. I mean, let's go ahead and take a look at it. You can see in the last 24 measure rounds, it's been decent, but the farther and farther we zoom out, the worse and worse it gets. And at these major championship type of conditions, that's where he struggles. I mean, we saw him struggle at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. It's probably why he didn't win last week. The around the green play kind of held him back. And at these super difficult golf courses, he's yet to cash in, right? He's somebody who at U.S. Opens in the past has competed, but those haven't been necessarily the most firm and fast conditions. One of them, I'm trying to think of where it was. When Tiger Woods at Bellerive, right, Xander Schauffele competed that week, but it wasn't super firm and fast. The PGA Championship that same year, I forget the venue, but it was also not running very firm and fast. He tends to do well when it's softer, right? When you don't have to worry about that around the green play. He's also relatively chalky, but that's not the reason we're fading him. It's the around the green play. Guys like a Rory McIlroy, a Dustin Johnson, even a Colin Morikawa, I would rather have around the green than somebody like a Xander Schauffele. So that's why we're fading him there. Victor Hovland, we already touched on. On the other side of that spectrum, though, Hideki Matsuyama is an excellent player at getting up and down. He's fairly priced at $9,300. The course history isn't ideal here at Riviera Country Club, but I'm willing to give him a pass given just how good that course fit is at Riviera. He's a top 10 total model ranking. He is a gainer for his career on Poa Nua, which, if you know anything about Hideki's game, that is extremely good. I like him a ton this week. He's usually somebody I don't like playing. That putting really kind of limits his upside. But when we're at a difficult golf course where the winning scores can be between, let's say, 10 and 15 under par, maybe 16 under par if they really take this place low, those are the type of tournaments he can win because he doesn't have to make a million putts to get to 15 to 16 under par. Scotty Scheffler, very likely to have a hangover this week. He's not very good around the green. He's also not the best putter on Poa Nua. He significantly increased the shots gained putting on Poa right here with his performance last week. In fact, last week, it was closer to right around neutral. And the greens last week weren't even really Poa Nua. It was a mixture of bent grass, Poa, and Bermuda grass, but it ended up being marked as Poa under the database. I don't necessarily agree with that. So I think that's a little bit misleading there. Cameron Smith, a core pick for us. He's got a great around the green game. I think a lot of people don't know this about Cameron Smith, so I want to go ahead and highlight this here. He's one of the longer players on tour. And people never give him the credit for this, but take a look at his driving distance right here. He's number 45 in the world. This isn't just for this field. He's longer than Hideki Matsuyama. I don't think any of you would have guessed that. He's longer than Sanjay M. He's also longer than guys like a Max Homa. Again, I don't think any of you would have expected that, but that's the case with him. And if he has this around the green game that he's absolutely known for, I mean, just immaculate around the green, immaculate on these greens. The guy absolutely ran away with it with his ball striking at Kapalua. I don't understand, first off, why he's not more expensive, but second off, why he's not more popular. This 16.8% is probably half of where it should be. I mean, this guy could be 25% owned, and I wouldn't be against it. He's a slam dunk play at this golf course. He's played ball at Augusta National. Again, he almost won the Masters. He had the lowest score that didn't win the Masters in history. If you guys remember that, it was the November Masters. Where DJ won, I believe. Yeah, DJ won that year, or I might be wrong. That might have been the year Hideki won. Not sure. But either way, great course history at the golf course. Every time he showed up to Augusta, he's made the cut. Love the comp course history. Jordan Spieth and Brooks Koepka. Let's go ahead and talk about them. These are more homer plays than anything. That's why I want to talk about them. I like both players. Both of them show up at major championships. In terms of the modeling, you can see they are well below everyone else in this range. So if you were doing it purely by the numbers, just trying to follow the model, you probably want to be fading both of them. But because I'm not playing Scotty Scheffler, because I'm not playing a Sungjae Im, a Bubba Watson, or even somebody up here like a Xander Schauffele, that's going to give me a little bit more leeway, I can get exposure to these guys. Again, it's more of a personal preference for both of them. Brooks at least looked good last week. He's good at these major championship type of conditions. Jordan Spieth at least is great around the green. I mean, one of the best short game players in the world. So I don't think it's too far-fetched to try and roster both of these two players. I also think they're underpriced. You know, if they were coming in with form, he could very easily be $9,600. Jordan Spieth could be even close to $10,000 if he was coming in with good form. So I think you're getting a solid price on both of them. Because we did fade some of those other players, I am still able to get Will Zalatoris, who I think is a much better play than both of these guys. So if you're looking to play a cash lineup, if you're looking to just go by the numbers, Will Zalatoris clearly the option in that range. He's not the best putter, but at the same time, in the past, we've seen at these major championship type of courses, that doesn't really matter. His ball striking is such a differentiating factor that even if he misses a bunch of 4-foot putts, which is more than likely going to happen this week for Zalatoris, he's a worse putter than I am. That's not going to cause him an issue, right? We don't need him to win at this price either. If Zalatoris ends up finishing in the top 5, that is going to be more than enough to be optimal, let alone if he finishes in the top 10 or top 15, just because of how many birdies he makes. So I really like him in DFS. In the outright market, I don't think he's a good bet. I don't think he wins this golf tournament. In fact, I don't really think he has a chance to win this golf tournament. Early in the week, I was a little bit more bullish on his chances, but just given the other guys on this field, I mean, for him to get his first win here would be a hell of a feat. I don't see it happening, but still do like him at DFS. Sam Burns, he almost won this event last year. People forget that. On Sunday, he was in the top 5, ended up falling off. He's not the best around the green player, but at the same time, we've seen him get a lot better as the schedule has gone on. And over his last 24 measured rounds, he's gaining significantly in that category. That's why we've seen him take his game to the next level. I've outlined this multiple times before. That was the only part of his game he sucked at. He could not hit chip shots for his life. So the fact that he's cleaned that up, again, has taken him to that next level. It makes me comfortable rostering him here at this tournament. A couple guys we're not rostering. Sungjae Im, we haven't seen him in over 2 weeks. I get the argument for him. He's a great course fit, right? Per the metrics, he's looked great, but we haven't seen him in 2 weeks, and this isn't a guy that takes off time. The last 4 times he's taken off more than 2 weeks in a row. Most of them are forced layoffs. It was usually during the December season, right, when you don't have golf tournaments going on, or of course, when he didn't have an invite to some of these major championships. Anytime he's taken more than a 3-week break, he's come back and missed the cut. That's an issue, right? It's more, if it was 1 or 2 times, I would give him a little bit of a break, but it's the last 6 times he's had any time off, he's missed the cut. And again, there's a reason why he plays every single week. I think he needs to stay in that groove. I think he enjoys being in that groove. And if I have to find a reason to fade a guy, that's going to be it for me this week. Bubba Watson, he's chalk at this course. He's won here twice. But compared to the names around him, right? I mean, Sam Burns, Will Zalatoris, Jordan Spieth, Brooks Koepka. Even if you go to the other side, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Matt Fitzpatrick, Adam Scott, Taylor Gooch, they're just head and shoulders such better players than a Bubba Watson that I can't justify paying this much for him. He's $8,500. Even if the recent form has looked pretty decent, you can see he's top 20 in that category. It's not enough for me to roster him. If he goes out there and he wins for the, Actually, I think it might be his 4th win here. I think he already has 3 wins. I might be mistaken by that. I heard someone say that this week, and I was like, wait, am I incorrect there? Yeah, if he ends up winning for the 4th time this week, so be it. But I don't see that happening. A guy I'm a lot more interested in rostering is Tony Finau. Tony Finau has not looked good over his last 2 events. In fact, coming in off 2 straight missed cuts. But I think people are quick to forget this guy missed a total of 3 cuts all of last year. So it's not going to happen. He's not going to miss 3 cuts in a row. I'll be in on him again at $8,400. He doesn't even have to come close to winning this golf tournament to be optimal. If he ends up cracking the top 10, which he does a lot more than the other peers in this range, could end up being in the optimal lineup. Let's go ahead and touch on a few of the questions down in chat. Looks like I'm getting a little bit behind. Caden Davidson says, what do you think about Leishman this week? I do like Leishman. So we're going to talk about him here in a second. You see he's in my player pool. He's also relatively chalky. I think the short game is enough to play him this week. I think it's enough to eat that chalk even. So we'll touch on that in detail here in a second, Caden. Barry says, do you know if Xander has his caddy back, Austin Kaiser? I would assume that he is. Yeah, so he wasn't caddying last week because he was sick. He had COVID. Now, don't quote me on that, right? He still might be in the COVID protocol. So I don't want to give you an answer there because I don't know, but I would assume that he's back. I mean, most people are getting better from COVID 3 to 4 days at this point. Jason R says, what's up, Luke? Nice haircut. Let's get this takedown. Thanks. I appreciate that, man. The flowing locks were around for a while. I enjoyed them, but it was nice to get a little bit of a change there. Continental says, Cam is always dangerous. He can win at any golf tournament. I mean, this kid, he's going to be a top 10, top 15 player at some point in his career. That's the way I see Cam Smith. John Berry says, love Fitzpatrick this week. Great on hard golf courses. Have you seen that he's sick? He didn't play today at the Pro-Am, so he didn't get any practice in today. He also didn't practice on Tuesday and obviously didn't practice on Monday because he was traveling from golf course to golf course. Tread with caution. That's what I'll say. Fitzpatrick might not even play. He might withdraw, so keep an eye on that. Barry says, going to take the big GPP down this week. Hey, if you take it down, you want to give me 20%, 20% of 300,000, 60K, I'll take it. That'd be like a year's salary. I wouldn't take that. Wouldn't mind that, man. Good luck. Ali Bro says, why not Bubba Watson? Intrigued. I'd much rather go with Adam Scott. So the issue with Bubba Watson, as I just said, he's just a lower pedigree player than the players around him. Right? He's got that elite course history. But if you can tell me that we can spend $200 more and get a Sam Burns, $300 more and get a Will Zalatoris, or even save $100 and get a Tony Finau, I'm going to do that 100% of the time. It'd be a different story if Bubba Watson was like 2% owned. It was the same story last week. I mean, he was $9,000 at that golf tournament. The reason why he was in our player pool and we took advantage of that is because he was like 3% owned. He was literally, you could put him in 2 lineups and get leverage on him. That's not the case this week. He's getting his fair amount of attention there. A few other things down here. I'm taking Sanjay Korean. Hey, yeah, we'll see. I'm not against it. Again, the modeling looks great on him. I've had a ton of really bright people that I trust in the industry also backing Sanjay this week. So it's a little bit dicey, right? I don't feel the greatest about it, but I really got to get Brooks Koepka and Jordan Spieth. I cannot live with myself not rostering them. 2 of my favorite 3 players in the world. Yeah. So again, that's why I said, guys, it's a little bit of a homer play. I wanted to go ahead and put that out there because it is a little bit of a homer play. Kokrak is the guy that kind of like, yes. Joe, yes. Dude, I have a feeling that we're going to be saying the same thing here. People have them out here as this bomber type, right, that can't do it around the green. That's not been the case. This guy won Colonial. Colonial is like the antithesis of that type of game, right? Bombers don't win at Colonial. Yet Jason Kokrak was able to. So yes, I absolutely agree with you there. Let's go ahead and just talk about him right now. We're going to skip down the board because Jason Kokrak, I wasn't playing him at the beginning of the week. You can see the modeling numbers look horrible on him. We haven't seen him play for quite some time. But in terms of pedigree, he should be up here at like $8,500. You could very easily swap Bubba Watson and Jason Kokrak, and I think you would have a fair pricing board. In fact, I think that he probably should be in that spot. And I think Bubba Watson probably should be at $7,700. So we're getting that $800 price decrease. He's the lowest owned option in this range. I mean, only Alex Noren is coming in with lower ownership than him. I'm going to be all over him. It really doesn't matter. He's just so much a better player than all these other people around him. He's won, 3 times over the last year and a half, 2 years. I mean, some of these guys here don't have any wins. I mean, Paul Casey has a win on the European Tour. He's only won like the Valspar twice, wherever it is. Alex Noren, right? We haven't seen him win in God knows how long. Some of these guys down here, right? First time winners, that type of thing. That's why they're a little bit overpriced. But you guys get the point here. Jason Kokrak, he's kind of being forgotten exactly as you just said there. He's great on Poa Anua. We take a look at the last 24 measured rounds. And again, this isn't anytime recent, but it doesn't look that good. This is why a lot of people aren't playing him this rate. The putting has been there, but the approach play has been there. The off the tee play hasn't. But if we take a little bit of a zoom out on his shots gained numbers here, I mean, look how good they are. He's gaining in every category but around the green. He's gaining with the putter, approach, off the tee as well. Yeah, man, I could definitely see myself playing some Kokrak this week. I absolutely agree. And Continental says you don't know which bubble will show up. Absolutely agree. I mean, he could come out here and win this golf tournament. It really wouldn't surprise me. But I mean, I'm not betting on that. I'm not willing to roster him just because he's won this event so many times. Yeah, he's overpriced as hell. Let's go ahead and keep moving down the board. So Matt Fitzpatrick, as I mentioned, to drop in birdies. He went from one of my favorite plays on the slate. He was somebody I was going to be well over the field on to 0% because of the stomach bug. He has not practiced this entire week. Jordan Spieth had that same type of issue a few weeks ago where he had a stomach bug, was in the hospital. Now, I don't think Matt Fitzpatrick was in the hospital bad, but look at Spieth's game that week. He looked horrible. The guy couldn't hit a golf shot for his life. So to say that we don't think it's going to have any effect on his game, it's just incorrect. We don't know what's going to happen. It could very well be a non-factor. You could go out there and have a really solid week, or he can miss the cut like a Jordan Spieth did. That wouldn't put that past him either. Either way, it's not something that I'm willing to invest in. I don't want to be taking that inherent risk, especially when I like Taylor Gooch a whole lot. I really like Mark Leishman. And as much as I hate Russell Henley as a player, he's probably one of my least favorite tour players out there. He's a good model ranker. You see he's top 10 in the model. So if it's going to be these good of pivots off of somebody who might not even end up playing tomorrow morning, it's a no-brainer for me. So especially when he's chalk, he's still 14.1% projected owned, which isn't higher than a Mark Leishman or a Taylor Gooch. It is higher than a Russell Henley, though, which you'd be surprised, right? Russell Henley was like 25% owned last week. He was chalk. He didn't end up coming through, obviously. Ended up making the cut, but not really doing anything with it. I'm willing to go back to that. I'm willing to go back to that guy that didn't pay off last week and is going to be lower owned as a result. I see there's a little bit of a dead range here. Everybody and anybody's talking about Joaquin Niemann this week, and personally, I don't get it. He's one of the worst around the green players on the PGA Tour. You can see even though over his last 24 measured rounds, it's looked okay. The more and more you zoom out on a Joaquin Niemann, the worse it gets, right? He starts to go towards neutral. If you look at the whole 2021 season as a whole, it starts to get into the negative. In fact, closer to a third of a stroke lost per round. The putting isn't ideal. You can see he's losing a third of a stroke per round. Even over the last 24 measured rounds where he's played much better than he did towards the middle of that season, he's still losing on the greens. And it's not really anything that should change because for his career, this is by far his worst putting surface, Poa Anua. So I know he looked really good towards the start of 2021. He was somebody I was playing in bunches, ended up having him probably in every single player pool for the first 4 to 5 months of 2021. He's somebody that I've severely soured on. Same thing with a Sergio Garcia. He deals with the putting issues on Poa Anua. We also haven't seen him play very often. He was over at the Saudi, I believe ended up making the cut there. But that wasn't a very strong field. Outside of the top 20, 25 players in that field, everyone else was kind of a nobody. So making the cut at the event really doesn't mean anything to me. In fact, I'm not really putting any stock in that at all. Abraham Answer, he's also horrible around the green. He's not very long off the tee, which means that the Kikuyu grass in that rough is going to affect him a little bit more than other players. So all three of those guys are fades. Similar story. These two guys up top are really bad on the greens. Abraham Answer is really bad around the greens. Jason Kokrak, we've already touched on. I absolutely love him this week. I'm probably going to have 25% Jason Kokrak. So I'm not even going to try and get a trivial amount of leverage. I'm going like all in on Jason Kokrak. He's probably going to be one of my highest leveraged plays on the slate. And I usually get him wrong. I'll go ahead and say that here as well. I'm really bad at reading Jason Kokrak. But when it comes to his upside, particularly his fantasy scoring upside, because he's such an aggressive player, he can pay off even if he finishes in like 25th place. You can just make that many birdies to pay it off. Kevin Na makes a good amount of sense at $7,600. I could definitely be going to him. Paul Casey, we haven't seen him play in quite some time. He's not the best putter on Poa Anua. But he's a solid price, right? He shouldn't be $7,600. He should probably be in the mid 8K range at the very least. So I'm playing him for that salary relief. Alex Noren, I can't trust the ball striking. He's also a putting specialist and doesn't gain on Poa Anua. So if you're a putting specialist and you're not gaining on the surface for that week, it is going to be really difficult for me to roster you. Seamus Power has similar issues around the green to some of these other guys that we're fading, like an Abraham Answer. So even though he's looked good over these last 24 measured rounds, I mean, in the fall, there was no hotter player than a Seamus Power. At these big time major championship level events, he's a fade. And we haven't seen him show up at a major championship yet, right? He's played in the fields. He's been at the PGA Championship, for example, last year, but hasn't looked good. Let's go ahead and catch up on the chat, see if there's any questions down here. Dropping Birdie says, I always play better right after I have diarrhea. Hopefully that's how Fitz is. I love it. I love it. Kane says, I think McNeely could be really good this week. Absolutely agree. We'll talk about him here in a second. He's got the around the green play to make up for those misses. He's a good putter on Poa Noa. So couldn't agree with you anymore. Let's touch on the bottom of this 7K range. And I'll remind you guys, if you have anyone you want me to touch on or do a deep dive on, particularly with some of the statistics, the shots gained stuff, make sure to go ahead and let me know down in the comments. We'll talk about Luke List here at $7,400. He's a core value play for us at this event. We hit the outright on him at the Farmers Insurance Open, which obviously felt nice. And I have very similar vibes this week. And I don't think he's going to go out and win. Obviously, I would have placed an outright bet on him if I thought that was going to be the case. But he loves this golf course. He's been interviewed multiple times where he has said that this is his favorite golf course and event on tour. He's really solid on the Poa Noa surface, which you probably wouldn't think would be the case because he's losing in that category. But if you compare that to his historical baseline on all putting surfaces, that's closer to half a stroke loss per round. So in fact, him only losing a tenth of a stroke per round is pretty solid. I'm on him once again. I'm going to try and ride that heater. We faded him last week, but this week seems like a much better fit. Patrick Reed, $7,400. That's the only reason we're playing him, guys. I have to play him. He's just way, way, way too cheap. Even if he's playing like complete dog shit, right? This is Patrick Reed. The last time he was priced in this type of range, he was getting completely disrespected by the books. I bet him at the Farmers Insurance Open last year, and he ended up coming through and winning that golf tournament. He had gone through a stretch of maybe 2 to 3 weeks where he is changing his swing. He lost over 5 strokes ball striking 2 of the 3 weeks going into the Farmers Insurance Open. And I sat there and I was like, I don't care how bad he's hitting the ball. This is Patrick Reed. This is somebody who's in the double digits for PGA Tour wins. For him to be at that type of number is disrespectful, and we're going to play him. It's the exact same argument this time around. He could very well go out there and miss the cut, but you can't tell me that anyone in this range, I mean, going the whole way up to, let's say, Max Homa, and actually, I didn't even push that up to Tony Finau. No one in this range has more win equity than Patrick Reed, and Patrick Reed is $7,400. Now, don't get me wrong. I hate the guy. I think he's one of the biggest scumbags out there because he cheats. I'm completely against that. It's one of the worst things you can do as a PGA Tour player. But when you're investing in fantasy, you got to put some of that aside. And with that being said, he should be even higher owned. He should be like 25% owned for this slate. So I'll definitely have myself some Patrick Reed. Thomas Peters came in second at this golf tournament twice. One thing to note, though, is that it was in very different conditions. Ended up being extremely wet both years that he finished second place. And the one year that he showed up here and it wasn't wet, he hardly made the cut. So I was higher on him at the beginning of the week than I am right now when I ended up hearing about some of the conditions where he was playing. And he said this himself. He actually did a report talking about how the conditions this week were going to be really firm and fast and how that's not when he played well here in the past. He's like, yeah, it was really soft. I was able to take advantage of those soft conditions, whatnot. So he's kind of dissing his own game. He was kind of talking himself down there. Confidence is a huge thing for these PGA Tour players. And if they're not coming out there saying, I'm in great form, the practices look good, I'm really excited for this week, that's a concern for me. Cameron Tringale, I absolutely hate. Anytime I play him, he ends up missing the cut, so he'll probably end up missing the cut this week. Corey Connors does not have the around the green play to get it done here. He's $7,300. He's also a dog shit putter on Poa Noa, so going to be somebody I'm fading. I see dropping birdies down in chat mentioned Molinari. Where's Molinari at? Molinari down here? Yeah, he lives on the golf course. He actually bought a home on this golf course just because he likes it so much. So I do think that there's something to be said there, especially because in some of his media things, he's been like, I like this golf course. That's why I actually moved here. That's why I'm actually trying to play here so much. Alex Solomon says, what is the sample size to go into the Shocking Punting Stacks career? It is career stats. So that's why I'm doing this. Obviously, guys that have been on tour a lot longer, like a Molinari, like guys like a Keegan Bradley, for example, this is a much more established sample size. Whereas for somebody like a Robert McIntyre, for example, or of course, Thomas Peters, this is probably why you mentioned it, right? It's minus 2.24 shots gained per round. It's because he doesn't have that huge of a sample size, right? If he had, let's say, 40, 50 rounds in the database, I'm at least hoping it would come closer to like half a stroke loss per round. Good question, though. Very good question there. Yeah, they are career stats. So the sample sizes are going to range. Some of them it's going to be like 5 to 6 rounds. Some of them it's going to be hundreds of rounds. But great question. Let's talk about some of the guys I skipped over. Keegan Bradley, I'm not really huge on just because of the around the green play. I like the ball striking, though, so you can see he's not excluded from my player pool. Bazane Hoot, great short game player. Siwoo Kim, he won the Players' Championship, so even though it's a horrible course fit, I have a hard time fading him at hard golf courses because we've seen him do it before. When he has his game together, he's not missing many greens. You could argue that when he's on his game, he might be the best player in the world, but he's only going to do that about maybe 1% of the time, right? I'm not going to put an actual number on it, but he's going to do that maybe once a year, and that's the golf tournament that he might end up winning. So in DFS, Siwoo Kim's probably one of my favorite players to roster just because of that inherent volatility that he has. We already talked a little bit about McNeely. You can see he's a top 20 total model ranking for me. The shots game putting on Poa Nua is excellent as well. The recent form kind of fell off the last time out, right? We faded him. Ended up working out for us, right? He ended up making the cut, but hardly making any type of an impact. I'm not fading him this time around, though. I think he's a great course fit here, particularly if he's coming in with single-digit ownership. Adam Hadman's coming in with great recent form. He's also a good course fit. I think he's a very non-flashy play. I don't think he's a sexy pick by any means, but it makes a lot of sense if you're looking for a cut maker. Harold Barter III has similar issues on POA around the green that I don't like here. It really causes me to not like him. Let's see if there's any questions down in the chat we need to touch on. Ali Burrow says, what are your thoughts on Rory this week? So yeah, I touched on him towards the beginning, but absolutely love him. I think he's going to be a little bit chalkier than I was hoping, but at the same time, the course fit's immaculate. He looked really good over there in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to have a good amount of him. We got all these bots down here posting random links. Please don't click any of those links, guys, by the way. They're spam links and stuff. I'm going to make sure I block them so you guys don't accidentally do so. Cool. Let's go down a little bit further down the board. Mackenzie Hughes at $7,100. You guys saw him during my core picks video. Anytime we get super tough conditions, like what we see here for this week, you want to be playing Mackenzie Hughes. At easy golf courses, resort-style golf courses, he's almost useless. But if the winning score is going to be anywhere lower than, let's say, 12 to 15 under par, he's always going to be in play. Robert McIntyre, you're only playing him here, essentially betting on the pedigree. We haven't seen him play very often on the PGA Tour, but internationally, in terms of official world golf ranking, he is severely underpriced. And many people think that this kid's going to be a top 20 player in the world someday. So if you want to buy in early on that, as I am, I would recommend you do that. EVR is underpriced given his pedigree. This is a PGA Tour winner, somebody who's also a relatively good course fit. If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, you'll see that the main issue is the around the green. Right? He's not perfect. He's far from perfect. But the guys down here in this 7K range, especially in the 6K range that we're about to get into, they're never going to have a perfect build, right? You're going to have to pick and choose some of the guys that you like. Up top, I'm a little bit more prone to look at guys' weaknesses, try to make sure that they don't have any faults in their game that could really hold them back this week. Whereas when we start to get a little bit further down the board, like what we have within Eric Van Rooyen, I'm more looking at a player's strengths, right? What is going to separate them from the field? Because everyone down here has weaknesses, right? So you're going to have to eat some of those weaknesses from time to time. It's much more about what they do than they don't do for the value plays. Already talked about Molinari. Absolutely love him, especially because he likes this golf course so much. You can see that his projected cut rate is much lower than some of the other people in this range. Because he's volatile, we haven't seen him play very much, but I'm willing to eat some of that risk. Johnny Vegas is not good enough around the green. He'd have to be nearly perfect from tee to green to have any shot this week. Ryan Palmer, he's got a well-rounded game that should suit him well here. So I like going to Ryan Palmer instead. Andrew Putnam's overpriced for this field. Same thing with Martin Laird. Martin Laird should be like $6,000. KH Lee has his issues around the green, also not the best putter. If you're going to take him on any surface, though, you definitely want to be taking him on Poa Anua. So at least there's something to be said there. That's why he's not out of my player pool. Right? He's not somebody I'm actively trying to avoid. If I end up getting him in 3 or 4 of my 150 lineups, so be it. Matt Jones is good at difficult conditions. Troy Merritt, you can see the metrics. Absolutely love the guy. That's why he's in my player pool. Joel Damon, a little bit shorter, a little bit less skilled around the green than what I'm looking for here at Riviera. So that's why he's not in the player pool. But I wouldn't mind getting him. He's a great approach player. He's at least accurate off the tee, so he has that going for him. I just think that there's better options. Matt Kuchar, we're fading. Other than course history, there's not really a reason to play him here. Pat Perez, other than course fit, you can see he's a top 20 course fit here. Not really a reason to play him. I think part of my model this week that's being a little bit underused is the approach play. I'm factoring in driving distance a little bit more than most weeks, and approach play is not being factored in as much as it needs to be. And here's why we're not playing Pat Perez, right? Look at this. So he's gaining with the approach play, but if we take a look at some of the stats, right, it's not good. Like, but his best stats 106. So I don't understand the approach play numbers here. In every bucket, he's average at best. In fact, he's horrible from some of the shorter ranges. From this middle tier range, he's 160, 125 from once. I mean, I don't understand it. Some of the longer tier stuff for Pat Perez don't look very good, so that's why I'm fading him. And yeah, he's just not a flashy pick, right? It's Pat Perez, for God's sake. He's not going to win this golf tournament. At the very best, he's probably finishing top 10, and that's if he has a perfect week. Pan Kazire, on the other hand, has the length that we're looking for, as a Pat Perez doesn't. Pan Kazire is also a much more aggressive player. If we take a look at the birdie or better percentage, now this is a small sample size, so I'm assuming, yeah, he's still way higher in birdie better percentage. He's number 43 on tour, and that's despite Pan Kazire having a dog shit start to the year. I mean, the guy hasn't really done anything since the start of the season. He's still putting up a ton of birdies. When he has his game on, he's going to go out there and score a ton more fantasy points than his placement position. So I like that. Russell Knox has been hitting the ball excellently over these last few months. But my favorite play in this range is Aaron Wise. It's not particularly close. We talked about him during the value picks video. The guy has been putting a lot better of late than what we've seen. You can see he's actually gaining in that category. He's gaining around the green, which we're not used to seeing. If he ends up missing the cut this week, which I kind of hope he does, I mean, obviously for the lineups that have him in it, I'm going to have like 20%. It's not going to be a good thing. But next week at the Honda Classic, if he misses the cut, you're going to be talking about maybe $6,300 Aaron Wise. This is somebody who nearly won the Honda Classic last year and is a perfect course fit. I've actually already ran a model for the Honda Classic for any of the players that might be playing in it. And he was a top 5 course fit in the world. And again, that's accounting a field that's a lot of players that won't even be there. Like a lot of these studs in the top 20 in the world, you might see 5 of them showing up next week. He was better than most of them in terms of course fit. So if he ends up missing the cut this week, so be it. He's going to be an even better play next week. But I will be having him in my lineups just because he's so volatile. He has that top end upside. Cam Davis doesn't have the around the green play we're looking for. Same thing with Cameron Young. Both of these Cams, very good off the tee, but they lack that short game excellence I'm looking for. Same thing with Sebastian Munoz. Extremely aggressive player. But whenever these guys get out of position, it is not good. I mean, it's good. Take a look at some of these numbers here. You can see Cam Smith, he's the best of the bunch. He's hardly a gainer in the category. He loses on approach, though, so he puts himself in that opportunity a lot more often. So that's kind of what I was saying before about weighted shots gained around the green, is these guys that lose on approach, no doubt they gain around the green. It's because they have so many opportunities to gain around the green with their chip shots. Whereas somebody up here like a Russell Knox, he's a lot easier for him to lose shots around the green because he has much less shots and take advantage of it. So that's why I'm fading all 3 of these guys right here. Moving a little bit further down the board, I think Minwoo Lee, you need to fade him. I don't know if you guys saw some of the things circulating around Twitter this week. Minwoo Lee commented on the PGA Tour's post of how strong the greens were. I'm saying, please rain. That's all you need to know. If the guy is scared of these conditions, you do not want to be playing him. As I said before, confidence is a huge factor when it comes to golf. A few comments down here. We have Joe saying, I would rank the lower tier dart throws after 6K as Rye, Mito, Kazire, Munoz. I'm not a huge Munoz guy. I like those other 3 a whole lot. I think Aaron Rye is probably the safest of the bunch. I think the highest upside, though, is Mito, which we're going to talk about here in like literally 2 seconds. Yeah, Mito is a great course fit here. And Ali Rose says, stars and scrubs or balanced this week. I think the majority of the field is going to go balanced. I'm probably going to have a few more stars and scrubs lineups because I think at least 3 of the guys up there towards the top of the board are going to finish in the top 10. So let's say if the guy's priced $9,000 and above, I think you're going to get at least 3 in the top 10, at least 2 in the top 5. So if you can fit 3 of those guys into the same lineup, I like the idea of that. So I'm leaning towards stars and scrubs, particularly because of the lineup construction. So many people are going to be going to that balanced build with how strong the field is. CBO says, is Fitzpatrick playing? I'm assuming that he is. I'm fading him because last time we saw somebody in this situation was Jordan Spieth, and he suffered through it. He, in fact, was talking about withdrawing during the golf tournament. That's never a good thing. And Justin says, if you were building 10 lineups, would you stay out of the 6Ks altogether? I don't think it's something that I would force in, right? I want to be actively avoiding the 6K range, particularly because there's some of the guys towards the top of the 6K range that I like, right? Like going to Matt Jones, like going to a Troy Merritt. But you could, right? So it depends on the guys up top. I think it depends on what contest you're in. Here, go ahead and let me know real quick, Justin. What type of contest are you in? Are you talking a GPP? Are you talking some smaller field stuff? Because I know you're building 10 lineups. I'm assuming that's for a GPP. But go ahead and let me know down in the comments, because that really dictates that question. Definitely dictates that question, because if you're in a cash lineup, or you're in like a smaller field single entry with all of those 10 lineups, or even a smaller field contest in general, where you only have like 1,000 to 2,000 entries, then yeah, you could probably stay out of the 6K range. But if you're in one of those large field tournaments, let's say you're entering those 10 lineups into the large field GPP, you probably want to be in the 6K range, because you want to try and fit in 2, maybe even 3 of those studs up top. So yeah, large field GPP. Yeah, so that's what I would say then. You probably should go into the 6K range. I wouldn't let the amount of lineups that you're playing dictate that. Play the right strategy. Take a few of those low leverage guys down low. Because I mean, look at the ownership on these people, right? Pretty much anyone in the 6K range, you're looking at a max of 5% ownership, and that's on the quote unquote chalky option. That is Aaron Wise. So I think that first off, you can get a lot of ownership leverage. You can also get a lot of salary relief. So I wouldn't be avoiding it. I'm talking about Mito Pereira, though. He's the elephant in the room. He should not be $6,600. It is ridiculous. DraftKings made a huge mistake in doing so. He's a top 10 course fit. If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, the guy is not playing how we would expect him to at all. You can see he's losing off the tee. This is one of the longest players on the PGA Tour, so for him to be losing off the tee makes no sense. He's gaining on approach. That makes sense. We know he's a good ball striker, but he's gaining a significant amount of strokes on the greens, nearly over 2/3 of a stroke gained per round putting. If he's going to continue that, and he can get back to the ball striking that we saw at the beginning of the year, where he was gaining, let's see, 1/4 of a stroke per round off the tee, over half a stroke gained per round on approach, this guy could win this golf tournament, let alone compete or make a cut. So I think Mito Pereira is by far my favorite value play on the slate. He's somebody who's going to be in my single entry lineup for sure. I don't understand this guy's putting. I mean, every report that we heard from Korn Ferry Tour people, and there's a lot of diehard Korn Ferry Tour fans, right, that are breaking down this same type of analysis, because they have DraftKings for the Korn Ferry Tour now. I don't know if you guys know that. In the same type of detail, they all know, and they're all saying that Mito Pereira could not putt for his life. But now he comes out here and tour, and the guy's putting like Dustin Johnson. So that's incredible. If he continues that, he's going to have an insane career out here. He could be a multiple-time winner, top 5 player in the world someday. Ricky Fowler, we're playing at $6,600. It's another thing with the DraftKings algorithm where it makes no sense. I don't understand why he's priced here. Even though the guys looked horrible over the last 24 measured rounds, you'd argue that this is the exact type of golf course where he could go out and win. He's gaining off the tee. He's a slight loser on approach. I'm willing to give him a little bit of a pass there. He's been pretty bad with that for quite some time. He's gaining around the green. But most surprisingly, he's losing with the putter. And at the Waste Management Phoenix Open, that was also extremely evident. The guy was putting himself in plenty of opportunities, but he cannot buy a putt. If he can return to his historical baseline of being a pretty solid putter, he's not the best putter on Poa Nua, so that's slightly concerning there. But he's also $6,600. He could very easily be in the mid 7K range, and I still think he'd be garnering ownership. And as of right now, I have him at 0.8% projected owned. I mean, just nobody's willing to go to him. And if that's the case, I'm willing to take a few shots on Ricky Fowler, because if he can figure out that approach play, this is a perfect course fit for him. And if he goes out and even makes a cut this week, that might be enough for us. So again, if we're just asking the guy to go out and make a cut, I don't think that's too much to ask for. A few comments we'll touch on down in chat so I don't get too far behind. Joe says, my thoughts exactly, being overweight on stars and scrubs is a good move for the tourneys. So assuming that you're talking about the lineup construction, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Especially because who doesn't want to fit in more of those studs up top? A Rory McIlroy, going to guys like Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson, right? You want to try and fit in as many of those guys into a lineup as possible. As good as that 7 and 8K range are, guys like a Sanjay M, right? We want to be taking the guys at the top of the leaderboard. NSN Isaiah says, what's up, bro? Check your DM. Yes, I'll check that as soon as we get off here. I did see your message. I forgot to get back to you. And let's try to do that for the next week. I think that's a great idea. Continental says Thigala. Yeah, actually, I skipped Thigala. Great point. I don't know what to do with him. Let's touch on him though. So it's a very important thing to talk about. It's like, where is he at? I swear. There he is. Sorry. I knew he was in that range. I just couldn't see him. All right, $7,300 coming in with good recent form. He's played well at this event in the past, and that was at an amateur. He's from nearby, right? He went to Pepperdine, which isn't that far from where this golf course is. I think Thigala makes a lot of sense. The issue is that he's still getting his fair amount of ownership. He's coming off an emotional roller coaster. So I still don't know what to do with Sahith Thigala. Part of me really wants to play him because the metrics look good. The recent form looks good. He's had success at this golf course in the past. But at the same time, part of me knows that after that emotional letdown, after these last 2 to 3 weeks where he's really excelled, he's bound for an emotional letdown, right? It's going to happen at some point. And I'm not going to hold it against him when he does, right? If he goes out and he ends up missing the cut, is priced in the mid 6K range for the next event, he's coming in with 1 or 2% ownership, I'm going to be screaming all of the praise for Thigala, saying that we should go out and roster him in bulk, right? Because at that type of price, at that type of ownership, I think it makes a lot of sense. But when we compare some of the options around him, like a Siwoo Kim, going up to a Tringale Peters, or even a Patrick Reed or a List, they're plays that I like more. So it's a tough pill to swallow. So I'm most likely not going to be playing him this week, but I totally understand if he's part of your process and part of the reason that you want to play him. I just won't be this week. You can't play everyone, right? Unfortunately, we can't play everyone that's in the field, and he's one of the few unfortunate victims of opportunity cost. Caden Davidson says, I'm playing Rahm, Cam Smith, McNeely, Molinari, Hughes, and one last golfer. So you have $8,300. So that's certainly, I don't even want to say that's a balanced build, but it's a little bit more balanced than Stars and Scrubs, which I'm perfectly okay with. And you have $8,300 remaining. So I wouldn't mind leaving salary on the table, particularly because you're taking a few of the chalky options. You know, guys like Molinari is probably going to be a little bit chalky. Same thing with Cam Smith and John Rahm. So if you had $8,300 left, maybe don't take Max Homa because he's going to be a little bit higher owned. Adam Scott, he's going to be higher owned than a Max Homa, but you're also leaving $100 on the table. So that might be able to make up for that difference. I'd take Taylor Gooch. So Taylor Gooch is my favorite option there. Even though Adam Scott's higher on the board, you look at the projection difference, right? I have Taylor Gooch projected with 3 more points than Adam Scott. You're for sure going to be unique if you leave $300 on the table, or at the very least, you're going to have like 20 to 30 times the chance of being unique if you leave $300 on the table. Yeah, I would go with Taylor Gooch, man. That's for sure. And Continental says a little bit overpriced for Thigala, but he didn't blink last week. Yeah, I agree. Like I said, I can't argue against playing Thigala. He's just a case of opportunity cost for me. I can't play everyone in that range. There's a few guys that I like a little bit more. Let's go ahead and finish off the bottom range here so we can go ahead and get you guys out of here. First and foremost, we're going to talk about Aaron Rai. I know somebody mentioned him before. He's a core pick for me this week. If you're looking for a safe guy down low to go out and make a cut, he's probably who you want to be looking at. We take a look at the last 24 measured rounds. I mean, the guy's been an absolute stud. He's gaining nearly half a stroke off the tee, over a third of a stroke gained per round on approach. The around the green isn't ideal, but at the same time, you're not going to find perfect players down low. We've already outlined that before. I'm much more willing to look at a player's upside down low than the things that are holding them back, which is why he's in my player pool. Wyndham Clark has elite course history here. He has 2 top 20 finishes in his 2 starts here. So I think he's worth a few looks. He's a great putter on Poa Anua. Patrick Rogers, same thing. His course history isn't as good as a Wyndham Clark, but he's got a great putting on Poa Anua. The course fit is top 25 for the field. So I think that makes a lot of sense. A little bit further down the board, Taylor Pendrith. You can tell a little bit of a theme with these guys. These are all long hitters, right? A lot of these guys down low I'm going to are bombers. And that's just from a course fit perspective. I'm much more willing to go to guys that have a good course fit down low rather than good recent form. So even though Pendrith hasn't played very well of late, I like the good course fit there. Ches Reavie, he's also a decent course fit. Dylan Fratelli is great at anytime he gets super difficult conditions. He's somebody that I lump in with a Mackenzie Hughes. Anytime you have a winning score between 10 to 15 under par, he's somebody you're going to want to take a look at. Harry Higgs is very solid around the green, something that people don't really give him credit for. Take a look at the last 24 measured rounds. You can see he's losing in that category, but if we zoom out a little bit, give him a bigger sample size, take a look at this. He's 63. Where is he? There he is. Gaining a third of a stroke per round. So it kind of depends on the sample size that you're looking at, right? If you take a look at the larger sample size, he's been dog shit from ball striking, so that's concerning. But then if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, okay, it still looks dog shit. I really thought I was going to be on something there. I must have been looking at the wrong stats. I mean, Harry Higgs looked pretty good last week, though, so I'm willing to play him. He's good around the green. Again, he's $6,200. You're only going to get what you're paying for at this point. Lipsky is the same type of thing. He looked good the other week. He's good around the green. He's solid on Poa Nua. Adam Long is a volatile player. When he makes cuts, he tends to finish in the top 25. So if you got a guy at $6,100 who might finish in the top 25 a fourth of the time, that's worth it in my opinion. CT Pan at $6,100. He's also a lot better player than his peers down here. And lastly, at the complete bottom of the board, there are three guys at 6K I will be playing. Hinckley Biota is a great short game player. It's the only reason I'm playing him. Kevin Tway has shown up in difficult conditions in the past. In fact, he's actually posted some really low rounds in difficult conditions. So I like going to him at that price. And lastly, Roger Sloan. He's also a really solid around the green player. He's solid with the short game. Again, these guys down low, the reason why they're priced here is they've looked horrible over the last 24 measured rounds. But at the same time, you're not going to find perfect players for this field. And the reason why I'm taking a few more shots down in the 6K range this week is also because we're dealing with a smaller field. It's only 120 players. We still have the top 65 in ties making the cut, which means we'll likely see 72 to 75 players on the weekend. You can take more chances down low because more of these guys are going to make the cut. And of course, if a guy's just $6,000, he finishes in the top 20, that's probably enough to pay off. So more this week than most weeks, I am willing to take some of these shots down here. Let's go ahead and see if there's any questions in the chat. And we're going to go ahead and wrap this up with a little bit of strategy talk. Ali Bro says, excluding Rom, who are your favorite two big dogs? Great question, because you know I love myself some Rom this week. Number one would be DJ, right? He's the other outright bet that I placed. I think the ownership's fair on him. I expected it to be single digit at the start of the week, but I'm still willing to get there. That's why he's down as a sleeper pick. I don't think Justin Thomas is really one of my favorite plays. And I'll say he's still somebody that I will be rostering. Let's see. I don't know if you'd consider the guys in the 9K range to be a big dog, but Rory McIlroy would be number two. Just an absolute stud. I think he has a real shot to win. And if there's anybody I add to my betting card come tomorrow morning, it will be Rory McIlroy. If I end up having a third outright bet placed, he's the only other guy that I'd really consider. Hopefully that answers your question there. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of strategy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to hop over to DraftKings and make a few lineups. And after we do the strategy talk, if you guys have any questions or any players that I didn't touch on that you want me to go back over, go ahead and put them down on the chat right now, and I'll make sure to do that before we wrap this up. So we're going to do a GPP lineup to start. And as always with GPPs, it depends on what type of contest that you're entering. So for this, we're going to assume that you're entering the large field GPP, so the $300,000 to first contest, and that you're entering, let's say, 10 to 25 lineups, right? I'm assuming that you're not max entering. There's not many people out there that are going to be max entering that contest to begin with. I don't max enter the large GPP every single week. If I'm going to max enter a GPP, it's usually the $5 or the $8 GPP, the 50-cent GPP if I'm just playing for shits and gigs that week. But this is going to be for the large field tournament, right? If you're just entering 10 to 25 lineups, because I know a majority of you guys out there, that's what you're doing, right? You're not entering 150 lineups. Not everyone out there is a max multi-entry type of guy. So we'll make sure to keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and start, right? So we're going to be hand building this lineup. Starting with John Rahm at the top makes a lot of sense. We're going to do that when we go over our cash lineup. So we're going to go ahead and start elsewhere for the GPP build. I think starting with DJ makes a whole lot of sense. Already mentioned before, I think he has a really good shot to win this golf tournament. And he also get a solid $1,100 difference between him and John Rahm. So for our next man in, we already have one of our stud options. Again, I like the idea of a stars and scrubs type of approach. So trying to fit in one, maybe even two more of these guys up top is going to be my ideal strategy. Like I said before, Cam Smith may be my favorite play on the entire slate. I think his short game is going to pay him huge dividends here. Also, the ball striking that we've seen over these last 24 measured rounds. And we might even be able to fit in Hideki Matsuyama. So I'm going to go ahead and just see what this lineup looks like by the time we get around to it. And trying to fit in three of these stud tier options up top is going to be my preferred strategy. You can see that's going to make us avoid this 8K range. If there's a range this week, I think that you can get away with avoiding. It is this range because you have a few guys towards the top like a Koepka and a Spieth that have shaky recent form, to say the very least. Guys that we haven't seen play for quite some time. people that are more volatile than anything in Zalatoris or Burns. So I don't think you have to feel all that bad about avoiding it. Again, I'll have some lineups where rather than taking Hideki, maybe I go to a Zalatoris or Sam Burns, particularly if I'm hand building. Let's go ahead and see what this one looks like, right? We can make a few lineups here to give you an idea. So now that we have $7,100 remaining per player, makes sense to at least dive down into this top of the 7K range. Patrick Reed makes a ton of sense because we're taking chalky options in DJ and Cam Smith. I mean, both of them probably going to be at least 15% owned, if not higher. Trying to differentiate with somebody like Reed is a way to do that. And it's not like Reed's going to be super low owned, right? You're talking right around 10%, but there's a few other guys in this range that are higher owned, right? Thomas Peters might be 15% owned this week. Luke List also going to be getting a fair amount of ownership. And if we spend up a little bit more for guys like an Abraham Manser, Kevin Na, or even guys like a Joaquin Neiman, you're in that 15 to 20% range, right? So there's levels to this. So let's move down a little bit further. We have $7,000 remaining per player. Maverick McNeely, one of my favorite plays on the slate. And one thing you'll notice about all these players, and I'm going to try and keep this a little bit of a trend, is they're all good around the green, right? DJ is very solid at getting up and down. We know how good Cam Smith and Matsuyama are. Patrick Reed, an up and down specialist. Same thing with Maverick McNeely, at least historically. So for our last position down here at $6,800, I also want to make sure that I'm correlating it with somebody that's good around the green so that we have an entire lineup that's correlated. And perhaps if the conditions get difficult this weekend, as I expect them to, I expect it to be extremely firm and fast, we end up having ourselves a little bit of a good situation. So in terms of the best around the green player in this range, I don't think any of them really stick out. I mean, Matt Kuchar is pretty solid around the green, but we don't like the course fit to begin with. Russell Knox, not very solid around the green. Same thing with the Joel Damon. But Patton Kizzire, he's a gainer around the green for his career, right? He gains right around a quarter of a stroke per round. He's long off the tee, which also helps him with some of the other correlations here in this lineup. So this would be a lineup that I'm really comfortable with entering. Not only does it have correlations in terms of skill set, you also have some low-end options like a Kizzire that we're going to, or even a guy like a Patrick Reed that's a little bit lower owned than some of his peers. Not only should this lineup be unique, I also think it has a lot of top-end upside. So that would be an example of a GPP lineup I'm looking for this week. I see we have a question talking about a single-entry small field lineup. Let's go ahead and touch on that. Absolutely, great idea. So before we go into the cash lineup, let's talk about a single-entry lineup. So anytime you're in single-entry, you want to just try and take your core plays, right? So when I enter a single entry lineup, I typically just take my core plays. So we'll go ahead and show you what that would look like, right? I really like Jon Rahm this week. I really like a Rory McIlroy. Now, we're not going to be able to take both somebody like a Cam Smith and someone down here like an Adam Scott. So let's go ahead and just put Adam Scott in here for the sake of this video. Skip Cameron Smith. Another core pick, right, that we can go to down low. We can go to Thomas Peters. Not a core pick, but he's one of my core value plays. Luke List makes a lot of sense. But we have some salary. All right. McNeely, he's pretty much a core pick for me this week. Same thing with Luke List. He's a little bit too expensive, though, Luke List. Let's go a little bit cheaper. All right, we're going to have to take someone cheap, so let's go to Aaron Rye. I know we mentioned that earlier in the week. Aaron Rye makes a whole lot of sense. And that puts us at $7,200. So other than McNeely, we could go to Mackenzie Hughes. This is what I would go for a single entry type of lineup. You can see I'm still dipping down into the 6K range, so that doesn't really alter my strategy, but it does mean that I'm trying to target the guys that I'm really confident in, right? There's no one on this list that I don't think doesn't make the cut. I think every single one of them makes the cut pretty comfortably. They might not have the highest upside, right? Adam Scott, more of a floor player than a ceiling player. Maybe the same thing with Mackenzie Hughes, right? He's not going to win this golf tournament, but he could very well end up finishing in the top 20. This is the type of lineup that I would go with. I don't take quite as many risks and challenges as I do with some of my GPP type of lineups. Cool. Let's go ahead and make a cash lineup now. And it looks like Joe says, stop, you're building my lineup. Yeah, man, any lineup that I post on here, like 10 people end up duping it. It's kind of annoying. Usually when I post a lineup in here, I don't end up entering it myself because I don't feel like duping it with like 20 of you guys. And by the way, that's not the point of me showing these lineups. It's not so you can go out and play them. Sure, you can go ahead and do it. Right? If you really like the lineup, go ahead and do it. But you're probably going to dupe yourself with like 7 to 8 people. It happens every single time, which is why it's annoying. It's why I don't end up entering the lineup. It's also why I hate doing this, but I know people like seeing it. So we're going to do it anyways. Let's talk about a cash lineup. So when you're running cash, I think it makes a lot of sense to go to Jon Rahm. There's also a lot of opportunity cost involved with going to somebody up there at $11,300. And from the builds that I've ran, at least on my optimizer, running my median projections and whatnot, it actually lives in this 9K range. Taking guys like a Rory, taking guys like Hideki, a Cam Smith. You can even scroll down a little bit further and still get a Tony Finau. You can fit almost all of these guys into the same lineup. And you can see it be a little bit aggressive. We only have $6,700 remaining per player. But when I like a guy like Aaron Rye so much, that's not an issue, right? We take an Aaron Rye, we scroll up a little bit farther, we take a Mackenzie Hughes, and we call it a day. Where's Mackenzie Hughes? There he is. This is what I would be running for cash all day. Just take as many studs and middle tier guys as you can. The guys down low, make sure they're the value plays that you love the most. And that's what I'd be running for cash. So that's all we've got for this week, guys. CBS says you got to put your nuts on the table and be original. Yeah, for GPPs, you definitely have to try and be original. And that's all we've got here for you guys. So I appreciate you guys stopping by as always. If you guys are watching this on replay and you have any questions or any players you want me to do a deep dive on, feel free to go ahead and put that down in the comments. I'll get to that as soon as I see it. And good luck with all of your lineups for this week, guys.